just actually the issue on Arab Spring and to some extent I would link it with what Victor yourself asked about the democratization. What some would say that actually reset policy got it right about democratization. That reset policy that you cannot change by sort of human rights policy, democratization agenda that you cannot impose or you cannot announce directly this agenda in other countries. At the very end, it's a domestic issue. And I think actually the Arab Spring has also reinforced those ideas that actually reset policy also with Russia is on the right track, because you cannot sort of impose or export some democratic model in other countries. So at the very end, the countries in question should deal themselves. Of course, there are some, and in this regard, I think also the U.S. policy, which is to some extent paradoxical, probably some disagree with me, but the U.S. policy has been Kissingerian, not so much democratic one, because the Democratic Party always has been more putting emphasis on democratic values and human rights and advancement of human rights and the democratization agenda. And in this regard, because of economic crisis, because of more global challenges and wide range of global challenges, because of some kind of unsuccess of the previous policies or unsustainability of the previous policies of the previous administrations, I think there has been also this sort of the dialogue among the equals, more based on a foreign policy interest rather than just exporting or importing some kind of the internal models. There are red lines, and I think of the Kovsky case and announcements, and Magnitsky case or Magnitsky issue has also shown the red lines, and I think there will be definitely support for the civil society, and I think this will be continued also from U.S. side. But certainly, I think it will be somehow sidelined on an official foreign policy agenda. Another issue which I think is interesting about Arab Spring, and again a little bit probably provocative, but what I heard from Zbigniew Brzezinski just a couple of weeks ago before I went away, that he was looking at the more strategic impact of Arab Spring. And his idea was that sort of his assessment was that due to Arab Spring, due to this transformation of Middle East, actually there is big fundamental shift of U.S. foreign policy priorities. That Middle East has played a very important role for U.S., especially in terms of energy security, energy supply. That at the moment there might be a shift, there might be much interest and much more activities in Arctic. That Arctic potentially in a longer term perception, longer term perspective might replace, or at least there might be some moves that it might replace what Middle East has played for the United States in the past. And actually Arctic means additionally that you have to engage with Russia directly, and you have to solve exploration rights, the maritime transit rights and issues directly dealing with Russia. So actually it would even add to the weight of Russia in sort of this fundamentally changing framework. I think it's definitely not a short term. I don't think that it's inevitable. At the same time, I think it's also interesting to think in such kind of terms that this Arab Spring has or had some contribution to strategic thinking in the foreign policy establishment in the United States.
Thanks. If I could just quickly add, because I forgot to respond to the last two questions, and I think they're related. That is, what are the priorities? What do we want from Russia, and human rights issues? On the priorities, I mean, I mentioned a lot of them in the security area. The main ones I would add to the list I had before that I think are really central to our own interests, and frankly to the health of the relationship, the sustainability of the relationship over the long run. Referred to in the neighborhood, Russian behavior in the neighborhood, and domestic politics, domestic arrangements in Russia, including human rights, civil liberties, and so on. We have an interest in it, and aside from what our interests are in those arrangements, my own view is that over the longer term, a really productive relationship from the U.S. point of view is only politically sustainable if there's progress there, and that's actually one of the vulnerabilities of that I think the Obama administration needs to address, because there hasn't been. It's an authentically difficult issue. I mean, I think how do you influence domestic developments in Russia? I think the short answer is you don't very much, at least in the near term. I mean, so I don't have some wonderful solution to propose. I'm not real happy about dealing with Mr. Surkov. That's not all they're doing. I mean, I'm not crazy about that working group, but there's, you know, I mean, in fairness, there's a lot of work with civil society groups. I'd like to see more, but all that's happening. The problem is that if there's going to be change, there are really two ways to do it. One is you hope that you've created a foreign policy environment that at least doesn't militate against it. And this is because this is an argument that you hear from a lot of Russian reformers, that, you know, the one thing the West can do is not give ammunition to domestic, you know, unnecessary ammunition to domestic conservatives about why they need to sustain current arrangements on security grounds, for example. And the other is long term, which is, you know, it's to build up the civilian side. Like see more exchange, you know, these are long-term things, more exchange. I like to see a lot of Russian high school students here, you know, in Western Europe and in the United States. I like to see a lot more exchanges. I'd like to see money go into civil society groups, the extent that we can do that without threatening their prospects, bringing down trouble for them from the administration, from the Kremlin, which happens, and so on.
I just want to carry on a little bit on the question of priorities, because I think that's quite an interesting question, an important question, and follow on from what you said about behaviour in the neighbourhood, because this relates again to the Katyn question and you know, the reconciliation to a certain extent that Poland has had with Russia. And I mean, if we look at from a Latvian perspective, I would say that the priority would be to achieve this type of reconciliation, leading through, which comes about through historical truth. I know that there is a lot of skepticism about the establishment of this historical commission, or the Commission of Historians, Latvian, Russian, based on the experience of Estonia and Lithuania, that this might not go anywhere. And but I think this is the fundamental issue in our bilateral relations. It was the fundamental issue as to why the European Union was created. You know, the reconciliation between France and Germany. But unfortunately, we don't have that sort of willingness to reconcile on the part of Russia. And there, it's only through the sort of reset type of arrangements, the perhaps a little bit more pressure from our partners about this that could help move the thing forward. Perhaps Poland has a role to play as well because of its positive experience. At the same time, it was very interesting listening to the ambassador reminding us about the solidarity that Poland got from the European Union vis-à-vis the boycott of Polish farm products, because I mean, my sense in the European Union is that we perhaps haven't had that solidarity. You know, there wasn't that solidarity, particularly at the time of Estonia, you know, the problems that they were confronted with. I mean, we have had, I mean, if we look at, if we look at the question of the border agreement that Latvia has signed with Russia, and Estonia has not signed with Russia, and the Abrena issue, my sense was that we had pressure from some of our European Union partners to deal with that, and not necessarily in the long-term interests of Latvia. You know, I have a slightly sort of more negative, because I don't think that signing that agreement has got us anywhere. I don't think we'd be in any better position in our relationship with Russia today if we hadn't signed the agreement. If we look back at the period since then, it has still been a very difficult relationship. It's only December that the president visited, and that's a positive thing that we had the president's visit. But yeah, the fundamental issue, the priority, is to seek the reconciliation and perhaps look at some imaginative ways of also on our part of saying, well, look, if you, Russia, agree on to the occupation, then we would be prepared to, express our forgiveness for the deportations or something like that. This is an idea that was thrown out by one of the religious leaders in Riga. So, I mean, I think there is scope to move ahead, but we need to have some imagination.